We have more to share with the rest of the country in preservation than anybody else, because we have the best of everything.
I've known Savannah pretty well all my life, and have seen it change. There were certain families that we were close to and would go by and visit. I remember being very much impressed by the people who would come by in the street selling vegetables and shrimp and stuff, and somebody would go out and look over the stuff and see whether they wanted to buy tomatoes or okra or whatever it was.
What do I love about Savannah? The trees. That was the first thing that really caught my eye as a child coming back to visit. They just seemed to reach out to shade me as I rode my bike or as my sister and I walked around.
I came out here 15 years ago and don't want to leave.
It really was a no-brainer to live in Savannah versus Statesboro. I tell you that I think everybody has that feeling when you walk into a house and you know this is the one. I think everybody has that feeling. I talked to my neighbors who just bought the house behind us, and she told me she walked in one day and the lighting was just right. The sun, it was the right time of the day of the morning when the sun was just coming through the windows, and she just said, okay, this is the one. She actually was showing it to a client and she bought it herself. She said, okay, this is the one I want.
I was so full of myself, dreaming about what I was going to have in my show, and I started seeing these peelings on the old Keogh house. It's now that big hotel that the guy that owns the mansion owns. Just bought it from the Swiss banking people, and I helped sell it to Joe Navis, so I knew about it before too. But anyway, that's who they bought it from. And I saw newts, I saw seascapes and all the peelings and all. And I ran down the street and I found an old wine hose bottle and started scraping, because glass, you know, so good to scrape with. And I started finding all the different layers of paint. And I brought the first palette back of paint, historic paint here. And of course, I had gone to William and Mary my first year and then transferred full-time into art up the Maryland Art Institute in Baltimore. But anyway, I took it to the beating, and I had painted all these colors that I had found on all these buildings around town, because most of them were deserted then. I just take a crowbar and go in.
I really kind of enjoyed Savannah being dark and mysterious, and I don't think the crime was any worse when it was dark and magical than it is now with all the street lights.
I do remember vividly when I first came to Savannah 15 years ago, on Whitaker, in the corner of Whitaker and Hall, you could hear gunshots frequently in the night. That's the thing of the past.
There was still a tendency among anybody who lived outside of downtown to hate downtown. They feared it. They wouldn't come downtown for any reason at all. There was nothing downtown for them. And now you can't seem to get them away. This neighborhood, I moved into it 13 years ago, and there was hardly anybody in it but a couple of drug dealers. And it's now a very comfortable community.
Oh, that was a wonderful aspect of growing up, having neighbors sitting out on the porch and kind of watching over you, and of course they were also watching to tell your mom or your dad, you know, what you were doing when you weren't supposed to be doing certain things. So it was very helpful. We had a corner store that was half a block away, and so it made it very easy to run a quick errand for your mom and under the watchful eye of your neighbors. So yeah, the community network was very important. In my experience, in having grown up in New York City and we lived in a high-rise building, there was an attempt to create a tenant association, but it wasn't the same because you're in a high-rise building and people are behind all their doors, and very few folks were outside, just the kids playing in the playground. So it was really hard to create that same sense based on the built environment and the differences there. And having lived in Gainesville also while I was going to undergraduate, it was a different atmosphere also, a lot more transient folks since it was a college town, a much bigger college town, and people really didn't invest the time or energy into getting to know neighbors because they figured, oh, they'll be gone in a couple of years, 4 at the most, given that this is a college town. So my experiences in the places where I've lived has been very different in terms of the sense of community.
It's almost like an extended family. There are 1, 2, I guess like 4 or 5 households on the street that we get together on a regular basis. If not just, in some cases just on holidays, in some cases every week. It just depends on the people. There have been a lot of people who lived here who have moved away and have come back, or not come back to the neighborhood, but we've maintained that closeness that we get together, every week.
When I first came here, the first several years, I had a dog. I walked the dog several times a day. I met through dogs a lot of people whose names I learned later on. I knew the dogs' names and whether the dogs were friendly or not.
I think the sense of community for us in this urban setting is considerably greater than when we lived on the Isle of Hope in suburbia.
Oh, it's changed. It's definitely changed with folks leaving the old neighborhood and new faces coming in with different attitudes from wherever they came from. It's a much bigger effort to try to revive that sense of community, and I think it has kind of died out or left when those longtime residents left as well.
It was much more old Savannians moving back into houses downtown from places where their family had moved out to a generation ago. And Savannah was really delightful in those days when I first bought this house. I enjoyed very much the old Savannah crowd that my parents and grandparents had known. And it just was much more a place with a character of its own.
Do you think?
But then every step forward is a step backward in some ways too. I don't think there's any gain without loss of certain other things. Yeah, I think Savannah is losing its character, its uniqueness. And I think we're becoming more of a theme park where we're beginning to act out our roles rather than being authentic.
The new sense of community is, I paid for this house and I want what I want. The new attitude is, let's change Savannah to fit what I want. Since I've come here and I've invested money and invested a little time, let's change Savannah into what I really want it to be. And I think that's where we're having a bit of our clash. The newcomers no longer enjoy or respect the beauty that brought them here. I guess they've gotten used to it, and now they want to try to change Savannah into whatever city or suburb that they came from. And natives like myself and preservationists are trying to educate those folks, but I think their numbers are just a little too much to keep up with. We have so many people coming in.
We are losing a sense of community, or have lost a sense of community, when not only when people are here for only part of the year, but also when property changes hands as much as it seems to now.
I think downtown in some areas is going to become so overpriced that a lot of people can't afford to live down there unless it's second homes.
It's very bad for us who want to live in our houses and don't see our homes as investments that we're going to cash out on. And the taxes, of course, keep going up. And the other costs of living here keep going up. So, but I guess it's inevitable that it happened because it's a very pleasant place to live. It has advantages that will appeal to many people.
You know, we wanted to live downtown when we moved here in 1986. But the condition of the properties as well as the overall crime rate absolutely prohibited us from even giving it a second thought. So as that changed and properties began to improve and clean up and crime began to regain some semblance of control by the police, we decided to try it. And we love the charm of the historic district. We love the pedestrian abilities for walking everywhere that we go.
Folks are very surprised when I tell them that I'm a native and that I live in the city limits. People are very surprised at that. We have a major influx of new folks from the big cities, from all of the coasts, north, west, and even some parts of the southwest. And the folks who are from here, longtime residents are leaving, selling their residences, and their children aren't coming back to live there. So it's definitely a change in the faces of the people in the neighborhoods.
I think that there are a lot more people like me who are from out of town who retired. And well, you know, I guess is what I'm trying to get at is that I've been here 15 years, and during the 15 years, a number of people have died, have moved away, have moved to join their children in Denver or Charleston. And quite frankly, I simply have not kept pace with this transitory kind of population. And there are a lot of people here now that I see on the streets I've never ever seen before and probably will never see again.
The further issue is then these people are not here to take care of it. The caretakers look after the property. And we do lose the sense of community. We do lose the sense of ownership because it's not really our worry. Our services that the city provides are affected because they don't have a voice in what's going on in the neighborhood, and it's left to the locals. That's a problem.
No, we have the port, and that's our main economic driver. Then we have tourism. But I would say running third would be the buying and selling of property in Savannah, definitely.
Some people are speculators. You know, they just buy and they're waiting for the house to appreciate in a year or two. And I think they're right. It continues to happen. It's been happening for the last 5 or 6 years, if not longer. So I'm sure, you know, I don't know the ratio of long-term owner-occupants as compared to, you know, renters or speculators. But
and I don't know if the researchers have considered that as a type of gentrification, but instead of having regular occupants of residences, we have people who are using these as their summer or winter residences. So we don't have that neighbor who's committed to the residential character of downtown. We have someone who's just here half a year and rents out the place to a tenant who again isn't committed to the residential character because they're only here half a year. So we have folks with a lot more money, I think, coming into the Landmark District, but they're not committed to stay. So that's pushing out folks who may not have as much funds, but who are committed to occupying the buildings full time.
What happened here was that most of the downtown became tenements. The row houses were divided into small flats. They had to be small because the row houses are not all that large, each floor. And so they were small apartments that were rented out to, at that time, I think in the early days, to the people who were moving in here to work at the new mills, and then during the Second World War, the people who were working in the factories along the river that built the Liberty ships. There was a lot of need for fast new housing at that time in the 30s and 40s.
We've all rented at one time or another, and some don't ever want to be homeowners, but some do, and I think it's okay to have that mix. It's just that when you concentrate it is when it becomes a problem.
I mean, I still think Savannah is one of the most segregated cities in the country. It's residentially segregated. You know, you have blacks in their own neighborhoods, whites in their own neighborhoods. The schools are segregated. And it's not a problem so much of fixing that's irrelevant. It's a problem of making sure that resources are there such that every single child, when they're finished high school, thinks that there is an economic opportunity out there to make a decent living. And that is a problem that Savannah has. It's sort of like you have a horse, you get it to work for you, but you never feed it. I think it's the same principle that operates in a lot of rental property around here. People just want the rent check to come in, but God forbid that they should spend any money on actually maintaining the property. There's one property down the street from here, and the only reason it got a really radical makeover was because there was a fire in there. Before that, it was really just bad looking. And all 4 units were occupied, so the owner was collecting rent on a regular basis, I assume, or else he would have changed his tenants. But he didn't put that much money into the property, and that's, you know, there are some people who do a good job, and then there are lots of people who just do not do good enough. Savannah is one of those cities that has the advantage of having lots of money. And Savannah has lots of free money in a sense because all the tourists comes there. Then we have the splat money that, you know, they get to mostly cream off the backs of tourists. And I'm not convinced that we always do the right things with it, that we're always very careful with it. And you know, it's a basic problem of having public officials manage money that's not their own. They have a lot of liberty in what they do with the money. Social development is a problem in the city, and the problem of, we talk about the problem of crime all the time in Savannah. Since I've been here for 2.5 years, I've heard nothing but crime. And it comes down to a matter that social development in the city is really the problem. There's not that much in terms of social development. There have been lots and lots of studies on crime, both in economics and sociology, and the final conclusion is that crime is not so much a problem of poverty, it's a problem of economic inequality. In other words, there are places where lots of people are poor, everybody's poor, and there's really not much crime. And there are places where lots of people are rich and there's not much crime. The problem of crime is not so much whether you're rich or poor, it's that there's an obvious inequality in the... But the bulk of crime in Savannah, and we always focus on violent crimes, a lot and not focus, because when somebody gets shot, it's a big deal. But, and I've said over and over again, violent crimes in Savannah is not as important as a big deal as the property crimes. And the big problem in Savannah is property crimes, and property crimes are always a crime of opportunity. Can I make a quick living by lifting somebody's property? Which is the bulk of because even over here, even in Kyla Brownville, over in the west side of Savannah, for the most part, in the last 3 years, I've been pretty safe. I've been out late at night. I have not had a single thing stolen from my property. I have, and as you can, most of the time it's like this. All you can hear is the traffic and the birds. Now and again there's a disturbance, but most of the times it's actually like this. Of course, nobody ever talks about the times when it's like this because there's no fun in that. There's no news story in, oh, you know, I was over there and all that I heard were birds.
If you have someone at home all the time in a neighborhood, you're going to have less incidences of break-ins and crimes just because there are always a pair of eyes watching. Baldwin Park is a good example of that. They're in the northern portion of the Ardsley Park district, and that particular neighborhood is very diverse, and they have older residents that are home during the day, and they're watching, they're out on their porches, they're in their yards, and then when they retire, you have the other folks who are up at night watching and listening. So you kind of have a 24-hour watch going on in your neighborhood because you have a diverse population that have different schedules and are able to kind of keep a regular watch on things. Whereas downtown, if folks are constantly leaving to go out of town or that kind of thing, nobody's really watching. They kind of take it for granted. And so there you see opportunities for a criminal to
everything's appreciating. You know, rents are increasing because property values are appreciating. So the truth is, I'm not entirely sure where they're going. I mean, I know the city is attempting to build new housing to, you know, house people, but I'm assuming that the people that are being displaced are just moving to, you know, neighborhoods they can afford, which must be, you know, pretty bad. So.
Well, take over here, Carla Brownville. We call this a black neighborhood. Why the hell don't the black people own the buildings? I mean, you know, if it's a black neighborhood, then you could buy the building. But a lot of blacks have never, it doesn't seem to me, have really taken home ownership as a serious priority. And, you know, I've talked about this to other people, that the sense of, we assume that everybody has the same sort of middle class values, which is to say property ownership and so forth. And that's not true. A lot of people, their sense of well-being and welfare and what they get their sense of consumption satisfaction from is not home ownership, is ownership of other types of consumption goods. And what is happening now is that other people who have that sense of home ownership as a real priority are being able to buy those properties from right underneath them. And again, that's how the market works. I mean, as an economist, I can't be too upset about that because that's how the market works. If you're really serious, then you rearrange your priority and you buy the damn thing, buy the building.
Some of the locals literally just remember it as cheap, easy purchase, and they refuse to pay what they perceive as an excessive price. So, you know, value is in what you get for the property. And so a house is worth what it sells for. Anytime there's a real estate market with this status, with this charm, and with this variety that the historic district offers,
and limited
properties, you're going to have some deep pockets come in and buy those. And right now, that money has to come out from outside of Savannah because people in Chatham County are too conservative to spend what it needs.
I think if you look at all the condos that are going up downtown, the constant sales throughout the community, there is a real estate boom that I don't think is going to stop for a while. I've been stunned at how many condos are going up and the prices for them. I think real estate is, if I was a salesperson, that'd be something I'd be looking at.
Certainly gentrification has really taken off, particularly in the last 10 years. The first 5 years I was here, very, very little was happening in the downtown area. Really almost no significant development that I can think of, redevelopment or gentrification, whatever you want to call it. In the last 10 years, particularly in the last 5 years, it's really gone gangbusters. But, you know, it's part of the national trend because not just here in the Sun Belt, but real estate values have just skyrocketed, whether it's New York City, Boston, San Francisco, all the usual suspects, but throughout the coastal regions of North Carolina, South Carolina, and of course Florida.
If you plan for diverse housing types within a subdivision, then you'll have a diverse population who needs those differing housing types. Families, for instance, with children, they need more bedrooms and a different floor plan than a senior couple that doesn't want to mow grass, or than a working single parent who has limited income. But I think all of those types can live in one community, but it has to be planned for. However, area developers claim that that's cost prohibitive. It's easier to just decide on one type and offer one type. And if they do offer different types of housing, they need more land, which is not easy to acquire, and has, a compilation of guidelines that they have to follow. So there's always going to be some complaint about doing it. But again, it goes to the public's will. And that public includes private investors and developers. And so if the will is to plan for a diverse Savannah where everyone can find some place, and the private market does provide housing for more than just the rich, I think we're going to have to provide the plans and the guidelines.